We weren't asking the right question.
Spoiler warning. True Detective, Night Country concluded on a purposefully confusing note after 6 perplexing episodes, leaving many unsolved concerns for viewers to consider. Numerous of these queries directly affect the plot and significance of the series. Some may appear unimportant, yet they add to the overall uncertainty that characterizes the conclusion. In any case, True Detective Season 4 is arguably the least satisfying installment of the anthology so far. The answers to the 2 mysteries of who killed Annie K and how the scientists at Tsalal Research Station perished were the focus of True Detective Season 4, Episode 6. Ultimately, the 2 cases were found to be closely related. When Annie K learned that the scientist's work was causing lethal contamination from the mine, they killed her. The cleaning crew at the research station then took revenge on the scientist on Annie's behalf. It is up for argument to what extent each resolution turns out to be satisfactory. What is evident, though, is that there are still a lot of unresolved issues from True Detective Season 4.
Your name is Pinocchio.
Subscribe to Movie Spy for more twist videos. 1. At the conclusion of True Detective Night Country, is Navarro dead? What her conclusion actually signifies. The most unresolved issue surrounding True Detective Night Country is the fate of Evangeline Navarro. In the end, Danvers is seen giving an interview to police in which she gives a purposefully evasive explanation for what happened to her ex-partner. Other shots show Navarro approaching Danvers' lake house, possibly as a farewell. There's also a lingering close-up of Eddie Tagaq and a car driving into a landscape that has lost its snow. These visual cues have multiple explanations. Either Navarro, having survived her ordeal on the ice, has finally found peace by solving the mystery of Annie K and accepting the spiritual side of her culture and character, or perhaps more disturbing, she has moved on in a more euphemistic sense by choosing to join her mother and sister. The question is left tantalizingly open-ended, so the interpretation that viewers choose to adopt will have a significant impact on True Detective Night Country's overall message. 2. Did the Tuttle connection offer any further information? Did the link from Season 1 matter? The extensive use of Season 1 Easter eggs in Night Country, which was frequently condemned for adding little to the plot beyond fan service, was one of the show's most contentious aspects. One such instance was the 2 mentions of the Tuttle family that were made in Season 1. The degree of the Tuttles' interest, their goals, and how they connected to the plot of Season 1 were all left unclear, despite the fact that it was established that the Tuttles were sponsoring Tsalal. Because of this, the Season 4 Tuttle Easter eggs are still a mystery, even if they might be important.
Annie's tongue. Who left it at Tsalal?
3. Who removed the tongue of Annie K, and why did it take place? Even though Episode 6 of True Detective addressed many of the main issues surrounding the Annie K case, there were still some unanswered questions. The most notable of these was the precise incident with Annie K's tongue. Both the ladies who killed the scientist and Clark during his interrogation appeared perplexed when asked about it by Navarro and Danvers. Hank Pryor planting it at the scene is one explanation, but it doesn't make much sense from a narrative or chronological standpoint.
You should know something. I didn't kill Annie K, I just moved her body.
So, the reason behind Annie K's amputated tongue is still unknown. 4. Why did Raymond Clark and Annie have such a strong fixation on spirals? Was it connected to the first season in any way? The spiral idea from True Detective recurred throughout Season 4, perhaps more so than in Season 1. There are numerous ways to interpret the symbol's actual meaning. Less evident is the reason for Annie and Raymond Clark's initial fixation with the spirals. The reason behind their intense interest in the picture, which appeared on their common caravan, tattoos, and other items, is never fully revealed. The real explanation is unknown, even though it might have been a subliminal message related to the spiritual themes of True Detective Season 4. 5. Was Annie really killed by Clark? Was he deceiving Danvers and Navarro? Half-truths and obfuscation abound in True Detective Season 4, from Danvers' deception on the Wheeler case to Hank Pryor and Kate McKitterick's conversation about finally burying the Annie K murder. But one of these instances has significant ramifications for knowing the whole truth about Annie's circumstances. Clark admits during his interrogation that Annie K was slain by the scientists and that it was too late for him to save her. He withholds from Danvers and Navarro the information that he subsequently covered a dying Annie's face with his shirt. The fact that Clark keeps claiming to be innocent in spite of the flashback evidence casts doubt on the veracity of his entire story. Moreover, it's never been established if he killed Annie, as he claimed to Navarro and Danvers, or if it was the other scientists. If he wasn't involved, the flashback might just be his guilty conscience reliving the scene. Either way, it casts doubt on some of the details surrounding Annie's murder. 6. What is the true meaning of
She's awake.
throughout the season, it was heard. The otherworldly aspects of True Detective may be the most unclear component of the show's climax. Many of the main characters have experienced visions and apparitions during Season 4, frequently accompanied by the theme, She's Awake. The conclusion implies that Annie K's ghost was the subject of this chant, which was heard by the scientists. But this doesn't explain why Navarro and Danvers heard it too, especially before the scientist's connection to Annie K was established. The recurring refrain, which is heard by several characters, also depends on the existence of the story's supernatural components. The idea that she's awake is undermined by other parts of True Detective's plot, which imply that the supernatural is merely imagined. In addition, why would Annie's spirit suddenly awaken after a 6-year period of silence? 7.
Take your clothes off!
Why did the scientists actually die? Was it anything else, or was it the weather? The destiny of the scientists is also less certain than it first appears, adding to the supernatural mystery at the core of True Detective Season 4. The women who herded them up said that Annie's spirit would decide whether or not the group would survive the chilly night, regardless of Annie K's potential involvement. Making naked men go out on the ice in December sounds like a death sentence. The mystery surrounding the vet's testimony adds to this. Pete Pryor's contact seems to confirm that the group perished prior to being frozen, implying that they were indeed attacked by a ghost before Danvers was called in to handle the issue. In any case, it's still unclear exactly what killed the scientists on the ice, especially since Lund was able to live. 8. How did Navarro release Clark? She was certain he would take his own life. The unconventional way that Danvers and Navarro questioned Clark calls into question a number of their techniques. The most incendiary, though, is the reason Navarro, having tied Clark to a chair, would let him step out onto the ice. There were still a ton of unanswered issues for the scientist who survived, as Danvers makes clear. Despite this, and after spending the previous 6 years attempting to investigate every facet of the Annie K case, Navarro chooses to let Clark commit suicide following a hurried interview that undoubtedly could have produced more details. It's also unclear why, after struggling to survive in the cold lab, Clark would end his life at this time. 9. Holden. Who was he? And how did he pass away? The mystery surrounding Danvers' polar bear, which, as many viewers had surmised, was ultimately solved in True Detective Season 4, Episode 6. Danvers revealed to Navarro, in an emotional conversation, that he had perished in an automobile accident. But the specifics of this occurrence are still unknown, as is any background information about Danvers' life and personality prior to the tragic event. Not only is it unclear how long ago the automobile crash occurred, but it is also unclear what kind of collision Holden was in, who else was involved, and a host of other important data that might help to explain the whole scenario. 10. Why does Liz see ghosts occasionally? Why do they show up at the very end, too? It makes sense that the most hotly contested topic in True Detective is the role of the paranormal. Some characters, such as Liz Danvers, entirely change the show's perspective on spirituality, even when characters like Callie Reese's Navarro appear to have a direct connection to the paranormal. For example, it's not obvious why Liz, who seems to witness paranormal activity early in the show, is so adamant that there is no spiritual dimension. Additionally, it's unclear why, despite her claims of ignorance when experiencing both auditory and visual hallucinations, she might occasionally encounter supernatural phenomena, such as seeing Holden beneath the ice. 11. Who revealed her true name to Navarro? Was that even accurate? One of the most moving scenes in the True Detective finale is when Navarro eventually learns her Inupiaq name from an enigmatic visionary entity. It's a poignant conversation that gives the character some resolution. However, it also poses some important queries. First off, when her name is finally revealed, it's not quite clear whose hand she is grasping. Furthermore, it's unclear if she had hallucinations while partially frozen on the ice or if the name is genuine. Because of this, the scene may symbolize a strong link to the afterlife or a hallucination brought on by prolonged exposure to extremely high or low temperatures. 12. Why do people continue to step out into the ice? What does it stand for? The persistence of several characters in Night Country to venture out onto the icy Alaskan ice, frequently by themselves, is a recurrent theme. Certain instances of this behavior have a symbolic and narrative meaning, like when Rose Aguineau follows Travis Cole's ghostly apparition or when the scientists are driven out as punishment for their transgressions. Less obvious, though, is why people who follow in the footsteps of Evangeline Navarro, Julia Navarro, and Raymond Clark do the same thing in the end. 13. Why did the actual True Detective murderers disappear from society? How could they have known it was important? Thoughtless at first, Annie and Raymond's relationship to the spiral is at least maintained throughout the series. Why the ladies who murder the True Detective scientists would think to engrave the sign on their victims is less clear. It seems improbable that the women would fully understand the importance of the spiral, even if it is present in the hidden lab, to the point where they would paint it on the scientists' heads. Its inclusion may serve as a symbol of the subliminal power of the spiral, although the true motivation is unknown. 14. How did the Night Country killers manage to escape justice? Why had Lund remained silent? How the women were able to escape punishment for their crime for such a long time is another contradiction surrounding the scientists' deaths. It seems unlikely that there would have been any tangible evidence other than the fingerprints on the hatch, and Lund's survival ought to have given investigators a clear visual record of what happened. One confusing component of the mystery is why he didn't inform anyone who'd forced him out onto the ice right away. 15. How come Clark didn't see the actual murderers? And then, how did he get away? The narrative presented by the vengeful group of women does not align with Clark's explanation for the events in Tsalal. According to Clark, as soon as he sensed Annie K's wrath ghost had returned for the group, he fled down the hatch. But as their testimony to Navarro and Danvers makes very evident, the group as a whole suddenly broke out, brandishing weapons and yelling at the scientists. It is quite implausible to propose that Clark was unaware of the true situation unless he had experienced a complete mental collapse. His overall lucidity following his capture, however, indicates that this is not the case. This merely begs the question of how the women managed to avoid capture. 16. What concerned Clark's fit? Why did Navarro witness it occurring once more? In the first episode of True Detective Season 4, one of the scariest scenes was when Raymond Clark seemed to hold something before turning around and muttering, "She's awake." This suggested that the mystery surrounding True Detective had a supernatural solution, which was corroborated by Clark's first allegation that Annie K had murdered the scientists. But now that the women have provided a logical explanation for the case, Clark's bizarre seizure doesn't seem to make sense. It is never verified if Clark's response was a coincidence or if there was a supernatural presence. 17. Are any ghosts in Night Country real? Did they truly cause any fatalities? If the supernatural happenings in True Detective Night Country were genuine at all, that is a broader existential question that the show fell short of fully addressing. This mystery extends beyond the physical reality of the two cases. Several characters encountered odd occurrences during the episode that, while pointing to the possibility of the paranormal, could just as readily be written off as hallucinations. For example, it's possible to write off Navarro's ghost experience in the Wheeler case as her brain processing the disturbing crime scene. Similarly, her sister's difficulties can result from a family history of psychological disorders and trauma. Night Country's equivocal views on the paranormal contribute to their strength. The fact that people in Innis encounter a variety of bizarre phenomena is made clear from the outset. This may be due to the realness of the visions, but it may also be because individuals are greatly affected by the severe weather and prolonged darkness. The problem arises when the supernatural influences the plot in a noticeable way. For example, there are significant ramifications if it is determined that the scientists were killed by the frigid conditions or by Annie K's spirit. Likewise, some people could find it disappointing if the response is left open-ended. 18. Navarro's visions. An interpretive look. Why did she fear them so much? As the question of Innis Ghost's existence is never entirely answered, so too is the degree to which Navarro's visions are genuine. She does, however, occasionally appear to experience genuine epiphanies, as when she talks about Danvers' son. On the other hand, the visions frequently appear to be an outward reflection of her inner pain and guilt regarding her family, particularly in relation to the deceased characters she frequently sees during periods of intense stress. Either the images are real and she has accepted them as a part of who she is, or they were never more than symptoms of psychological discomfort. The story is profoundly affected by both readings. Depending on the theory a spectator favors, the fact that this riddle remains unsolved renders various situations absurd, potentially diminishing the impact of the plot. 19. In actuality, did Pete get away with murder? How did he reconcile with his relatives? True Detective's most perplexing side plot, aside from the primary scientist and Annie K plots, involved Peter Pryor and his family. These issues were not much resolved by the conclusion. Pete dramatically shoots his father in episode 5 in an attempt to save Danvers. He spends a large portion of the episode's conclusion making amends for his transgression before joining his family again. It's unclear how this occurred following his breakup with Kayla and how he managed to get away with murder following his father's disappearance. Furthermore, Rose Aguineau seemed to have no personal stake in covering up his crime, so it is unclear why she would consent to doing so. 20. Really, who is Rose Aguineau? Does she know anyone who knows Rust Cole? The early discovery that Rose Aguineau's Travis was the father of Rust Cole, the Season 1 dual protagonist, was one of the most thrilling aspects of True Detective Night Country. Although this created a strong link between the two characters, Rose Aguineau's place in the Innis society and the reasons behind her assistance to Pryor and Navarro were never made apparent. Rose's true identity remained unknown despite several fan theories suggesting that she shared a closer, potentially parental bond with Rust. However, no further links were ever discussed. 21. What was the status of mine? Is it open at all? It was made evident in the True Detective, Night Country finale that the mine collaborated with the Tsalal Research Station to increase pollution and support their research. Even though it was evident that criminal activity was involved, it was unclear if the project had been formally terminated or permitted to continue as usual. The finale didn't quite reveal what Clark said, but the leaked footage of his confession seemed to spill the beans. In the murky closing minutes, the underlying contradiction between the mine's environmental cost and economic benefit, many townsfolk were employed there, remained unresolved. 22. How was the hidden lab accessible to Annie K? Did she find another method? Or did she break inside the station? A number of pivotal sequences in True Detective Episode 6 involved the revelation of the hidden lab. It was not just a component of Navarro and Danvers' ice cave inquiry, but it was also essential in enabling the women to learn Annie's fate. It is never made clear how Annie learned about the lab, even though Navarro discovered it by accidentally falling into it and the women discovered it by emptying a mop bucket onto the opening. It was not an easy find, as the preliminary police investigation demonstrates. So it's odd that she should have been able to locate it with a quick scan of Tsalal. 23. The events that befell Oliver Tagaq, what made him flee? An early red herring in True Detective, Night Country concerned Navarro and Danvers' hunt for Oliver Tagaq, who was evasive. He was very furious when the two followed him to an off-grid settlement and left the area shortly after. He had been following the scientist and Annie K cases. But the reason he fled and why he left the Spiral Stone is never revealed, leaving the audience with a sense of unresolved mystery. 24. Why was Heiss needing to be shot by Hank? Even so, Navarro and Danvers discovered the cave. At the dramatic conclusion of Episode 5, Hank Pryor shoots Otto Heiss at the mining company's request in order to keep the lab's location a secret. The fact that Danvers and Navarro discover the lab door right away in the climax, however, slightly lessens the power of this event and begs the question of why Hank felt the need to shoot Heiss in the first place. His acts are crucial because they cause Pete to shoot Hank in retaliation. However, it appears from the events of the True Detective, Night Country finale that Hank's murder was wholly superfluous.